Good morning, everyone. On behalf of everyone here at the CREST Network, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Semantics, How to Say What You Really Mean. I just wanted to spend a few minutes this morning having a little bit of fun with a couple of concepts about the types of words we choose to use. It's a real pet peeve of mine. I truly believe that words do matter. And I truly believe that you should be saying what you mean. And we're going to just discuss a couple of ways where maybe some obvious things are going to come out, but maybe some things that you don't realize are we're saying them one way, but we really mean another. I want to just put that in the forefront so that we're a little more aware of how we use and choose our words. To me, especially in our industry, we think we're just dealing with a real simple, this is not a big deal. I'm a simple businessman, you're a simple homeowner. But when you start looking at the details and how every time we go to work, we're dealing with a contract, all of our professional standards are judged by very legal documents. And then when we submit an invoice and we try to collect, we're dealing with insurance companies that are dealing with contracts and policies and standards themselves. Because of all of that, the use of certain words does take on special meaning. So let's talk about a little bit of that as it relates to our lives and as it relates to all different parts of our business. Words do matter, whether we're talking about personal relationships or business dealings. What you say and how you say it can make the difference. We've always heard this expression, say what you mean and mean what you say. I'm sure you heard that even growing up. But I like a different expression. I think there's an expression that we can talk about where we're referring to speaking with a purpose. When we talk, we should have a reason behind what we're going to say. We shouldn't just be talking for the sake of talking. That's conversation. And if we just want to pass the time and have conversation, that's fine. We should still have a purpose to what we're saying within the conversation, obviously. But as it relates to business, we need to make sure that we're speaking with a purpose, that the words we're using are heading towards our ultimate end goal. Now, how do we do that? Let's talk about semantics. Semantics might be a word that you've heard used, way back in high school or college, and you might not have heard it used much recently. I happen to use it quite a bit. Semantics is the study of meaning that is used to understand human expression through language. That's a lot of words. What it really means is semantics is what did you mean by the words you used? That's what semantics is. If you say you are definitely going to the store, you don't say the words, I might be going to the store. And we're going to get into all the different uses of those action words in a little bit. But if you're trying to convey that you're definitely going to the store, you're going to use the words, I'm definitely going to the store, or I will go to the store. There's a commitment there, there's a different meaning, and there's a different mindset. So that's what semantics is all about. Yes, when you're in a debate or when you're in a discussion or when you're, God forbid, in an argument, many times people will use your words against you. That is using semantics to their advantage. So that's why it is important for us to choose our words very, very wisely. Because if we choose our words wisely, then we can use those words to our advantage. That's really what this webinar is all about. We have a lot of things going on in our business, and we want to make sure that we're choosing our words wisely so that we can use our words to our advantage. Now, this goes both in the spoken word and in the written word as well. For me, there's no distinction when you're typing an email or when you're sending a text message. There should be no difference in the words you use compared to when you're speaking on the phone to somebody. The meaning of shall or should or may or might, those don't change whether you type them or speak them. Okay. When you hear the word shall, that sounds like it's very Old English and very proper. Well, we're going to talk about that now because in law, the meaning of words is described as a term of art. Okay, why am I talking about law? Well, I said it before. Every time we sign a work authorization with a homeowner, our contract literally is a lawful piece of documentation. We are bound by the things that are in that. If it says we will, or you shall, or we shall, that is something that we need to talk about. The word will versus may, those are things we're going to discuss in the next few minutes. But those are legal terminologies. When you guys say we follow the S500, that's a legal binding document. That's established within the federal government as our standard of care. The IRCRC is a standards organization, and they are registered with the government. ANSI standards are federal standards, and that's what the S500, S520, all of the standards at IICRC and our RIA through their merger with IICRC, that's what those things are now. Those are legal standards. So when it says in the IICRC that we shall do something as opposed to we should do something, we need to understand what that means. And then finally, again, when the insurance company tells us, well, we're not paying for that because it's not covered under the policy, we don't ever want to discuss policy, but we want to understand what they mean by that. Their interpretation of policy is, again, a legal undertaking because their insurance policy is a legal document. So it's very important, even though we don't want to be a lawyer and we don't want to run our business as a lawyer, we need to be very, very cognizant of how the words that we use, both in written form and in the verbal spoken form, can be construed in the legal setting, okay? So let's talk about a couple of things that are these terms of art that appear in the S500. First things we're going to talk about two different words, may versus must, or shall versus should, okay? We're going to start with may versus must. There is a huge difference in meaning between may or must. It might seem obvious, but I want to talk about it from a legal standpoint because these words show up all the time throughout the S500 on what we're obligated to do. When the word may is used, it suggests that there is an option, or another way to put that, there's a lack of obligation. When you see that word, the option or the choice on what to do is left to only one person. It's you, the professional restorer. Obviously, if you've heard any of my webinars before, I truly believe that most restoration projects should be part of a collaborative effort, and it shouldn't just be us making these decisions. We should make them at least in an understanding or a consultation with some of the other parties. I'm not saying you need permission. I'm saying, but you should be communicating with the insurance carrier. You should be communicating, obviously, with your homeowner or your client, whoever that is. But the word may allows you some flexibility. If you see the word must, there's no option. That is a legal obligation. If we're talking about the standard, then we're obligated to follow the direction of the standard when this word appears. Everybody kind of understand that. If you have any questions on this or any kind of concepts, drop me an email when you get a chance. My email is bill@thecrestnetwork.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any of these specific semantics questions. The next one we're going to talk about is should or shall, because it's kind of the same mindset. It's very, very similar, where should is very similar to may. You are being advised of the best approach when you see should. When it says the restorer or the professional should, that's kind of less of a obligation. Like may, there's no opinion given as to what is a good course of action. You have basically the entire leeway yourself. Should means we really think this is a good idea. The only difference is it's not an obligation. Okay, so we think it's the best approach, but we're still going to leave the ultimate final decision up to you. So should has a little more power than may. But then when you see the word shall in all forms of legality does not leave any ambiguity. It is absolutely an obligation. In the standard, you're absolutely obligated to follow that direction if it says the restorer shall. Okay, again, shall and must have the same legal meaning, but the difference is must and may kind of work with each other, and must or might work with each other. Shall and should always work with each other in terms of direction as well. Okay, another way to look at these are called action words. So there is something that's called a modal of possibility. I'm getting very off the track here, but this is how deep semantics goes. And if you are a study of linguistics, these are the things that you learn. If you're going to be a lawyer, these are the things you learn. If you're going to be a writer, these are the things you learn. And obviously, if you're going to do anything in terms of compliance, if you're going to do anything in terms of writing standards or working on standards, there are people on the ISCRC Standards Committee who are linguistics experts. They are action words experts. They are term of art experts. So when you're not sure about what you're going to do, and this goes back to my example about going to the store, if you're not sure, you can use the words like might, may, or could. That's a 50-50. That's even a 90-10, but you're not sure about it. When you're sure about it, you're going to use the words will, which doesn't appear here, or must. And when you're absolutely sure that it's not going to happen, you're going to use the words won't or can't. Usually the difference between won't or can't says not able to. Won't is much more of a personal wish or desire. I won't do it kind of denotes my personal opinion as to whether or not I'm going to do it. Can't usually implies that there are outside actions keeping me from doing it. I can't give you a raise because we're not making any money is different from I won't give you a raise because I don't feel like you've earned it. I hope you see the difference there. We're going to get into some of those as we move along. We're going to make sure that we talk a lot about what's going to happen in our business world. The most important thing I want you to understand is let's think about it this way. What are we trying to convey? So, what are you trying to convey? That is what you need to say. If there's a chance you might do something, you have to use the words might or may. Don't say I'm definitely going to. Don't overpromise and underdeliver, especially in business. Let's get into some of these business discussions now. I know we've talked a lot about this, and I'm sure I've bored enough of you to death, but hopefully I've also kept a lot of you entertained enough to want to hear how it applies to our business, because it does apply to our business every day. I'm going to give you the simplest place where Dick and I pull our hair out of our heads all the time. And it's going to involve our everyday marketing and production words that we use. They're right up on top. Assessment, inspection, or estimate. What is it with those three words that you intend? What is your thought about what you want to provide to the client? I venture to say that 90% of you are not using the proper word on your websites, in your literature, or even in your visits. When you explain to the homeowner or to the prospective client what you really want to do when you get in their home. So we're going to talk about those three words so that you understand how crystal clear the distinctions are. Because for a lot of people we talk to, talk to Dick and he'll talk blue in the face about this. When we talk to our clients about this, they, for the most part, think that all three words are exactly the same. And they'll say to us, oh, what's the difference? Well, the difference is very striking in terms of your obligation to the homeowner. And you certainly never want to get in the habit of overpromising and underdelivering, or worse, lying in any of your literature or words. So let's talk about this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about your assessment. An assessment, again, these are somewhat dumbed down dictionary definitions of these words. An assessment is a general bird's eye overview of the damage with some basic tips on how to proceed. That's what an assessment is. That would basically be, you walk in the house, you look at the damage, you take a little walk around, and within 5 minutes, you're able to tell the homeowner whether it's something they should even think about doing themselves or not. That's an assessment. Is that what you want your goal to be when you walk in the door? I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be. Every business needs to make their own decision as to what their goals are on that visit. An inspection, when you say we will do a free inspection as opposed to a free assessment, an inspection involves a more detailed overview of the damage, including some exploratory actions and photos, along with a plan of action on how to proceed. So an inspection is obviously going to take more time. It's going to be more detailed in terms of taking some readings, possibly going into other areas of the house. You know, if we're going to check on crawl spaces, it's getting into the crawl space. It's not kind of shining a flashlight underneath there. Okay, it's going to involve a plan of action on how to proceed. Well, if you are going to entertain signing with us, here's what we're going to do. So it's going to be a lot more detailed and a lot more aggressive and action focused than an assessment is. But it's missing one key factor. Yeah, I'm giving you that pregnant pause on purpose to make you uncomfortable. The one thing it's missing is a price. Okay? There is no assumption of price when you use the word inspection. However, when we do use the word estimate, we are assuming there's going to be a full inspection, even more detailed than the inspection itself. We're going to provide a lot of documentation on the things that we see. And then we're going to give either a summary quote, or if we're going to be providing them with Xactimate, we're going to give them a detailed quote for services to be rendered. Remember the difference here. So now that we're looking at all three of them, I want you to ask yourself, and I'm going to take a 5-second pause here. Ask yourself, which of these three is really what we're doing now? And which of these three are the words we're using to describe our actions? Okay, now my next question, which is a much more detailed question, it's going to provide you with a little more insight as to the kind of the way that Dick and I operate the CREST network. Now I want you to say to yourself, which is the way that I really would like to be operating to maximize the efficiency of my team? And how do I then make my processes and everything I'm doing from marketing all the way through production match that goal of mine? Okay, that's why this is really important. That's why semantics really matters. If you started the conversation by saying, well, what's the big deal between assessment and estimate? I hope you realize now that it's a huge difference. Companies sign work up every day by doing assessments. They just have a different pitch. They have a different sales approach. Companies sign up work every day doing inspections and never giving a price. They just have a different sales approach. And yet more companies go out and they give full-blown estimates and they sign up plenty of work. Do they sign up more work than people who do just assessments or inspections? I can't tell you that. Each company has its own model, and what works for one may not work for another. I can tell you this. Dick and I work with companies all the time who are absolutely not performing to their peak in spite of using the estimate model, which we would think the more detailed you are and the more transparent you are, the more you're going to sign up work. I'm here to tell you that it's not always the case. A lot of it has to do with your process and the semantics you're using during your sales process, which is an entirely different story that I can tell you. And it's an entirely different webinar that we can go over. It's actually more of a 3-day class, but that's for another day. Speaking of estimate, the other major mistake we make as an industry, not just as individuals, but as an entire industry, is dealing with the client and the carrier, and we interchange the word estimate and invoice all the time. So I know we understand the difference, but I want to put it crystal clear in words for us so that there's no ambiguity again. And we need to really drill down on this and practice this. An estimate is generally referred to when we're talking about recon work only. We submit our plan for work that we will be doing, which will include a scope of work and pricing for that work. When we do that in recon, we're expecting the adjuster to come back to us, and the homeowner for that matter, to come back to us and say, well, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that, I'd like to change this and that. And we're going to have some negotiation and agreement before we start. We expect that to happen. If that is what you're expecting when you're submitting the paperwork at the end of your mitigation, then you truly are submitting an estimate. But I'm here to tell you that none of us should be expecting to negotiate and have any agreement on the mitigation side if we've already done the work. That is by definition an invoice, which is a submission of our charges for work already performed. And if we're providing a proper invoice, we're providing proof that supports all of our work, including photos, documentation, readings, moisture logs, all of the things that the IRCRC says are part of an invoice, along with any other support information. We fall into the trap because what happens? We submit this to the homeowner, they send it to their carrier. And for most of us, we're helping our homeowner navigate through that, very confusing field by being the company and being the person that's going to help them with their carrier. When we help them with their carrier, the carrier is inevitably going to come back and say, we'd like to discuss your estimate and we'd like to know if you have any room for negotiation. They put those words out there. The second that we allow them to put those words out there and do not refute those words, either in writing or verbally, we have now turned our invoice into an estimate. They're doing it on purpose. Remember, they live in the world of semantics. They live in the world of, well, the policy doesn't say must or shall, so we have the obligation to have our own judgment, so we're going to say no. They live in that world of gray, so they understand full well when they're sending us that email, they're using the words estimate and negotiate on purpose. We need to make sure that we are as technically savvy as them with our words by making sure that we say we did not submit an estimate, we submitted an invoice for work already performed. Therefore, we cannot negotiate. Remember, the other things that they're going to want to talk about, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, are things having to refer to the claim. We want to obviously avoid that, but they're really good at semantics. This should educate you into why it's important. It's not no big deal. Don't use the words no big deal when they call it an estimate, because you guys will then fall into the trap of calling it an estimate as well. That's a huge deal. We have to avoid that. As an owner or a manager, there's a lot of other words that I personally work with our CREST members on trying to avoid. And they're very important words. The word negotiate, always, we want to avoid that word. If we're describing it as an invoice, it's never appropriate to consider negotiation. If somebody wants to talk to us about our invoice, we're always going to discuss our invoice. And we're going to discuss it based on issues with the invoice or corrections that need to be made. Okay. Negotiate usually doesn't involve specific issues or specific corrections. So when the adjuster wants to discuss negotiating or do you have any room, your first response should be, I'm always willing to discuss any issues you have with my invoice. Remember, there are only two things that go into an invoice. There is the scope of work or the specific things you're billing for, the equipment, the labor, the materials, those types of things. You have to specify in your invoice, if you're providing a detailed invoice, exactly what you did. And then the other half or the other piece that makes up your invoice is the pricing that you're using. So remember, if the adjuster wants to negotiate, all he cares about is lowering the price. But you have to have a reason for why he wants to lower the price. So the only way he can legitimately lower the price is by discussing either an issue he has with a line item or the pricing that you used. Force him to discuss those. If he just says the words, well, it just seems a little high, or I don't think that the job should have been this high, what I'm willing to pay you 6,000 instead of 6,800. That is a very, very poor method. That's literally negotiating your invoice. Make him do his work. Make him go line by line and find areas of disagreement or find areas that need correction. Make him do his work. If he can't do that, then you have no reason to lower your invoice. Now, I always preface it by saying every decision that gets made by an owner on whether or not to accept a lower amount for their invoice is a business decision. I always defer to the homeowners decision making on if they think the bill's too much. And I will always defer to the owner of the restoration company if they want to accept a lower amount. That's always my caveat. But I'm here to say, don't ever use the concept of negotiating once you've submitted your invoice. The next word I hate is pay. You don't give your workers pay. They receive compensation. For just about everybody, including myself, when I worked for companies way, way back, I got a paycheck. So everybody usually associates pay with the amount that they take home in their check. As an owner, you know that what it's costing you for that employee when you put in all the benefits and when you put in all the taxes and all the other expenses that you're putting in, it could cost you more than twice as much as what that person is taking home in their quote unquote take home pay. So don't get caught up in using the word pay. It's a losing argument for you as a business owner. Always refer to it as compensation because compensation refers to everything, the total package. That's salary, that's bonus, that's commission, that's overtime, that's benefits, that's training and education, that's 401ks. It's all of those things fall into compensation. So you always want to make sure that you're keeping your employee's eye on the bigger number, the total amount you're doing for them and giving them. That's always key. Stay away from the word pay. When you start talking about pay, you start talking about their vision, and it's usually a bottom up because at the end of the day, for 51 weeks out of the year, your employees usually only care about how much they're taking home. So they always want to talk about that number. And I'm not saying they don't have a right to do that. I'm not saying you don't have to address that. But what I am saying is let's make sure we're always keeping it focused on what I call a global pay number, which is the full total compensation. If somebody gets a quarterly bonus or a monthly commission, a lot of times they forget about that every third or fourth week or every third month. They might forget about that. And then they start getting cranky and crotchety about what their take home pay is. And you always need to refocus that and recenter the conversation back on full total compensation. Over the years, in order to keep good people, many of you guys have had to increase the compensation packages. I got in this industry 14 years ago. There weren't any restorers, or very, very few restorers, offering medical, dental, 401ks. There were very few. But as our market has matured and as the workforce has become much more technical and professional, we've had to do that to keep and find good workers. So there's nothing wrong with that, but just understand that that comes at a cost, and that comes at a cost to you as the owner of the company and as the company in general. And it's not just what the people are taking home anymore. Okay. Settle a claim. Keep this word out of your office at all costs. Remember, you cannot settle a claim. Nobody in your company can settle a claim. If you have somebody who's trying to do collections and they use the word, I'm trying to reach out to your adjuster to settle this claim, they're actually breaking the law. In some states, restorers can go to jail for using those words. There are only 3 people who can settle a claim for a homeowner, and that is a lawyer, their insurance agent, or a registered public adjuster. They're the only people for a homeowner who can settle a claim. Your invoice is part of the homeowner's claim, but you are not representing the homeowner when you're discussing your claim. You're representing your own company, just giving some answers to the adjuster on behalf of the homeowner, but you have nothing to do with their claim. You have to understand that. The most important thing that you have to understand is that you want to make sure that you are discussing your invoice. Okay? We're not settling anything. And the term settling a claim is another trap. The adjuster will send you an email. I'd like for you to help me settle this claim. You have to immediately respond and say, I understand your job is to settle the claim and that my invoice is part of the claim, but I am not a registered public adjuster and as such cannot settle any claims. I can discuss my invoice, so please let me know the parts of my invoice that you have an issue with. That is where we need to leave it. It's very important. And it might seem like it's no big deal. And, oh, Billy, you're just kind of pushing the envelope a little bit just to stretch out this webinar. And that's nothing could be further from the truth. Dick is my witness. I have probably had more arguments with restoration companies that we work with or that I have worked with on large losses when this word comes up. I absolutely is a major, major pet peeve of mine that I have a major problem when we talk about settling a claim. Please stay away from that. The word goal, business goal. I hate the word goal as it relates to business. Yes, we should all have goals. We should all have life goals. We should all have business goals. But I hate the fact that we focus on the word goal, because a goal is nothing without tangible steps. Those tangible steps are the plan. So I would much rather always be talking about my plan moving forward instead of my goal moving forward. Again, semantics, but I really, really like talking about the plan. Yes, this might sound weird for some of you who have worked with me, because the first thing I always ask is, what's your goal? Give me your 1, 3, and 5-year goals. Okay. But then what's the second thing I do all the time after I ask you and you give me your 1, 3, and 5-year goals? We immediately put a plan of action together. We stop talking about those goals until much, much later. The vast majority of the conversations from that point forward are about the plan of action. A goal is simply a wish. A plan of action has those tangible steps. Again, we keep going back to process. but you can't build a process until you have a plan of action. So the plan of action has those steps attached. Those steps are the process. The plan of action is how we're going to achieve the goal. The goal is still just that lofty, I call it amorphous thing. An amorphous thing is something without a structure or a body or a skin. So without any kind of plan, the goal really has no chance of success. So let's stop focusing on our goals, our company goals, or our individual goals. If you say if you say to one of your employees, what's your goal for 5 years from now? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? They should be able to give you an answer. But then your next thing should be, all right, work with me on putting a plan together for us to get you there. Just listen to those words and think about how impactful that is when you're sitting talking to some of your key personnel. Tell me your goals for the next 5 years. And then how about we put together a plan of action so that we can get you there? Now you're a facilitator. Now you're a helper. Now you're showing that you're caring so much about their goals that you're willing to invest time and effort into a plan, which makes it real, which makes it tangible. That's huge. So I'm not saying eliminate goal. I'm saying don't focus on the goal. Focus on the plan that allows the goal to get met. Conversely, when we're talking with our employees, these could be the two most damaging words that we will ever utter, or else. Yes, we want to be a taskmaster. Yes, we want to be able to call people out on the carpet. But let's not turn into our mom and dad from when we were 6 and say, you're going to eat your dinner or else. The or else, I call that the veiled threat. The or else does very little to promote a good final work product. If anything, it does the exact opposite. It's what's known as negative motivation. Even in torture camps, they have found out that negative motivation really doesn't work as well as they always thought. Well, I'm going to do this. I need this information or else. It really doesn't work very well. It clearly doesn't work in today's environment. One of the things that Dick and I have learned in doing a lot of research on this new generation of worker is that threats of their job don't really work. They actually work in the alternative. People love to feel valued now more than ever. The new generation of worker really likes to feel like they're valued and that they're appreciated. Or else doesn't do that. Or else basically says, all I care about is your product. I don't care about you. And you are interchangeable because the or else implies that you're out of here. So usually in these day and age, when we use the term or else, we're enabling that person to basically walk out. We're giving them permission to leave before we've gotten anything from them. We're not motivating them to work harder. We're doing the exact opposite. We're showing them the door and we're getting them to quit. Now, if you don't want to pay the unemployment benefits, that's fine. That could work. But for the vast majority of us, we're finding a lot of difficulty in getting good workers. And I'm here to tell you, the best place to find good workers usually starts with the guys in your own company who you thought should have been good workers, but right now they're not. It's your own fault because you haven't provided them either with the proper training or the proper work environment to make them feel motivated to work. Yeah, that's a hard look in the mirror, but it's very possible that you are the reason that you're getting yourself to the or else moment. It's not the 25-year-old. That's a convenient excuse for most of us today. But the reality is, Dick and I work with companies all over the country that have plenty of 25-year-olds who are the backbone of their companies. So it's an excuse to paint with a broad brush and just say, well, this new generation, they just can't handle it. Well, what they can't handle is your old approach to things. When I was brought up, yeah, or else worked in business. I didn't want to lose my job because I was thinking about my job as a career. Well, very few workers today think about their jobs as a career. They think about it as a transient step or kind of a stop on a journey. It's your goal to turn it into a career for them. And that's by nurturing, and that's by supporting, and that's by training, and that's by working with their goals and turning them into plans. It's certainly not by threatening themselves. I hope you understand through what we've talked about here that words have power. Your words, both spoken and written, have power. They can be used to a great advantage. They can also be used against you. And most of the times when they're used against us, they are used against us without us even knowing that's happening. And that's because of what I call blatant ignorance. And I'm not calling anybody stupid. I'm saying that we blatantly avoid trying to understand the words we're using because we don't put enough value on things like semantics. We don't put enough value on using the right words. We don't put enough value on educating ourselves to know here's what I want to say. What's the proper way to say it to have the impact that I want it to have? That's a very important lesson. I don't treat it as something that is easily picked up. I think this is something that takes weeks and months of research, training, coaching, education. It's something that I learned very early on. I probably should have started the webinar by saying this, but I've been to several semantics classes. I was part of a debate group all the way back in high school. And even in college, I took a linguistics class, which taught me the proper forms in terms of art in order to be a very good communicator. I took speech classes. I was able to overcome a lot of fears I had in using the wrong words or using improper terms. And I was able to educate myself. And I've spent a lot of time over the last 30 years at least educating others in the different fields that I've been in the proper use of words and verbiage to portray the things we want to portray. So I hope you've been able to get a little bit out of that. And I also hope that you will reach out to me if there are any things about this webinar or things I haven't brought up before that kind of come to mind for you or that you think you need a little help on. On behalf of everyone at the CREST Network, I want to thank you for joining us today. I just want to remind you of a couple things. We have a CREST podcast that's available to you on Spotify right now. I want you to be able to download that. We have CREST casts that are published all the time. Dick, myself, even a couple of our guest commentators that we'll have on, or guest experts. You can find some really good information. We've got dozens, if not 100 different CREST casts up there right now. We also have the CREST library. For those of you who may or may not be CREST members, we have something that's called the CREST library, which has literally hundreds of resource materials, publications available for you. And it's a straight monthly membership. $99 a month gets you in. You can bounce around in there as much as you want. And it's pay by the month, no long-term contracts. So those are just a couple of other options for you guys. On behalf of Dick Wagner, my name is Bill Giannone again. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next CRESTcast. Thanks. Bye-bye.